the entire school courtyard froze. Hundreds of eyes watched in silence as a tear ripped through the back of her uniform. Her hands flew to cover herself. Laughter erupted. But the girl who stood trembling under the morning sun had a secret that none of them knew. And what would happen next would silence those laughs for good. Ameera was new. Not just to the school, but to the city itself. Her father had taken over the position of head administrator at Crescent Hill Academy, a prestigious private school with more history than any other in town. But Ameera didn't walk into school like someone whose father owned the place. She walked in like a girl trying not to be seen. She was small, soft-spoken, and always dressed perfectly. Not to stand out, but because it was easier to follow every rule than to give people a reason to judge. She kept her long hair tied neatly, always lowered her gaze when passing others, and usually sat alone during lunch. It wasn't that she didn't want friends. She just didn't know how to begin. The problem wasn't her shyness. It was the girls who noticed it. Ruby, Hina, and Sarah, the self-declared queens of Crescent Hill, found her silence offensive. They couldn't stand how she didn't seek their approval. And as all bullies do, they turned their insecurity into cruelty. At first, it was harmless whispers. Ameera would walk past and hear giggles behind her. Books knocked over by accident. Spilled water at her desk. Notes left in her locker with rude drawings. She quietly picked everything up. Smiled softly. And said nothing. But Ruby was growing impatient. Her cruelty thrived on reactions. She didn't want silence. She wanted submission. One morning, the school announced a special assembly. Parents were invited. The courtyard was filled with rows of benches, banners flying, and teachers standing tall. Students wore their best uniforms. Ameera wore hers too, hair tied neatly in a low ponytail, nervously adjusting her sleeves as she found a seat. She didn't notice Ruby and her friends watching her from the side. They had planned something cruel. Something public. As the principal handed the mic to a guest speaker, the courtyard quieted. Just as attention shifted, Ruby moved forward. A subtle trip made Ameera stumble. While she tried to regain balance, a sharp tug came from behind. The sound of fabric ripping cut through the silence. Gasps echoed across the courtyard. Then laughter. Hushed whispers. Phones lifting to record. Ameera's back was exposed. Her uniform torn down the middle seam. Her hands reached to cover herself, face burning with shame. Her knees buckled. She tried to walk away but froze in place, completely humiliated. And then came a voice, deep, firm, and commanding. Enough. Everyone turned. Walking down the main path of the courtyard was a tall, composed man in a gray suit. His presence alone demanded attention. His eyes scanned the scene. Then settled on his daughter. Who did this? He asked calmly. It was the first time many students realized who he was. Mr. Shah, the new owner and head administrator of the school. Ameera's father. She stood still, trembling. But when her father gently placed his jacket over her shoulders and looked her in the eyes, something in her heart steadied. Ruby stepped back, trying to act casual. But her smirk had vanished. Mr. Shah looked to the teachers. Bring me the names of the girls involved. I'll see them in my office. Now. No one moved. The bullies didn't laugh this time. Phones slowly lowered. Students looked around, unsure of what to say. Ameera walked out with her father. The next day, Ruby, Hina, and Sarah were suspended for a full term. Their parents were called in. Apologies were demanded, first from them, then publicly during the next assembly. Phones that recorded the incident were confiscated and deleted. Mr. Shah issued a powerful statement: there will be no tolerance for cruelty. Not in my school. Not to my daughter. Not to anyone. But that wasn't the most powerful part of the story. The most powerful part came days later, when Ameera walked into school, not alone, not looking down. But tall, with confidence in her step. Students who once ignored her now greeted her with respect. Even teachers looked at her differently. But Ameera didn't become someone new overnight. She began to speak more in class. She smiled more. Sat with students who had no one to sit with. She didn't let her pain make her bitter. Instead, it made her brave. She also started a kindness club, with a surprising number of students signing up. It wasn't just about stopping bullying. It was about creating a space where no one felt alone again. Months later, when another shy student transferred in and hesitated to speak, it was Ameera who took her hand and introduced her to everyone. She had once been the girl in the shadow, but now she was someone others looked to for light. Because in a world full of noise, it wasn't her silence that made her weak. It was her strength that had simply been quiet, until the right moment arrived. And when the world tried to rip her apart, it was her dignity, and her father's faith, that stitched her back together, stronger than ever. Moral: kindness is not weakness. Silence is not surrender. And sometimes, the quietest voices carry the loudest truths, when spoken with courage.